Hi guys, it's Phil
And Liam
from Die Hard on a Black, and we're excited to talk to you about a brand new podcast we're launching called 48 Hours of Buddy Movies.
That's right, folks. 48-hour-long
approximately
episodes exploring 48 different buddy movies, beginning with the original classic that started it all, Walter Hill's 1982 masterpiece, 48 Hours, starring Nick Nolte and Eddie Murphy.
And just like Die Hard on a Blank, our new show will explore the influence of 48 Hours on the action genre, one buddy movie at a time.
We'll be covering iconic franchises such as the Beverly Hills Cop movies, the Stakeout movies, the Bad Boys movies, classics of the genre like Running Scared,
Hyams Hive Rise Up,
Midnight Run, Red Heat, Tango and Cash, The Hard Way,
plus tough thrillers such as To Live and Die in LA, Black Rain, Point Break, Training Day, and The Way of the Gun.
as well as a few wild cards that you might not expect, such as RoboCop, Alien Nation, and, of course, Phil's favorite,
Harley Davidson and the Marlboro Man.
So, if you're a fan of two buddies talking buddy movies,
Then 48 Hours of Buddy Movies is for you.
visit patreon.com/48 hours of buddy movies to subscribe for the price of 1 cup of coffee a month.
See you in the squad car.
Or walking to the squad car, mildly irritated that we've been paired off.
Wherever. That's patreon.com/48 hours of buddy movies to subscribe. Welcome to Die Hard on a Blank, the podcast where we explore the influence of Die Hard on action cinema, one action movie at a time. I'm Philip Cawthorne, and with me as always is Liam Billingham, and today's film is 3,000 Miles to Graceland.
It's Die Hard in Las Vegas. It's Die Hard in Las Vegas. I'm trying to do
cool.
my worst
Yeah.
Elvis impression imaginable.
There's going to be a lot of that. I brought my
Oh, my
Elvis
God.
shades.
Yeah, you brought your Elvis
this
shades.
Is our first. Is this our first Vegas?
This is our
movie?
first Vegas trip. What's your relationship
first trip to Vegas.
Do you have one? Vegas, baby, Vegas.
It's pretty. It's my relationship to Vegas generally involves me crying in a bar at 3 a.m. because I've drunk so much.
Oh,
And
Phillies. That's Philly special.
my Vegas it chews me up, man.
Yeah.
Like I'm not a huge I'm not a huge Vegas guy. I've had some great times there, but it usually ends up like pretty bad for me. And the next day, the hangover just is so decimating that I'm like, you know what? It's not really my
Cup. It's not your cup of.
It's not my cup of tea.
Cup of tea. I've been to Vegas.
How about you?
Twice.
Okay.
One time was 2 weeks before the 2024 election to canvass. So I also have some tears around that. My second time was 2 weeks ago when I stopped there for tacos on the way to Utah. That was very pleasant. And in a month, I'm going there for my first ever Vegas bachelor party.
Oh, okay.
So
cool.
maybe that's the one that will end in tears, though it's a bunch of 42-year-old men.
Yeah.
So I hope that we
go either way.
Yeah, exactly. It could get real Cassavetes dark, or it could be a really light experience. We'll have to see how it goes.
Well, what about Elvis? Do you have are you an Elvis guy? Do you have much of a relationship with?
to use the
King?
to use the parlance of Quentin Tarantino in the deleted scenes from Pulp Fiction, you're either an Elvis guy or a Beatles guy. And I was raised somewhere in the middle. My mother, shout out to Suzanne, loves Elvis. So, do you know Love Me Tender? You know that song, Love Me Tender? When I hear that song, I think of my mom and I get a little choked up. Okay. Not that because she's still around, but it's just I really closely identify the tenderness of that song.
So you do have some kind of an emotional relationship to Elvis and his music. Okay.
Yeah, and I had
You're not a big Vegas guy. Okay.
I'm not a big Vegas guy. I don't gamble. It's one of the few vices that I don't smoke anymore or anything like that, but it's one of the few things that it's never made any sense to me. I like a game of cards, but I'm not a gambler. And in fact, when we go to one of the things I'm excited about at this bachelor party is it's more of a honky tonk bar kind of party rather than a gambling party. So but I think Vegas is a fascinating American invention.
Yes, and that's what I think it actually. I'm going to frame my thoughts around this movie with this idea that occurred to me this morning, where I thought this movie and Vegas is the perfect setting for it. It is a white trash opera. That's how I kind of see this movie.
Interesting.
And I actually, you know, look, this is a pretty maligned movie. I'm gonna mount a pretty spirited defense of it. I love this movie.
Ladies and gentlemen of the white trash jury.
So
another week in a row where we might be on opposite sides of the fence on this motion picture. I will say it's better than I remember it being.
Okay. Now, so what was your history with it?
I saw this movie maybe a week before I went to college, because it came out in February in movie theaters. I remember, it's funny, it came out the same weekend as Hannibal, which was one of the first R-rated movies I saw by myself. So I think I went and saw Hannibal rather than 3,000 Miles to Graceland, and I watched it later on a screener because I remember it coming out on the shelf, like in the back room of the video scene in Duxbury, Massachusetts, being like, what the fuck is this? Because it's Kurt Russell, Kevin Costner, and Courtney Cox, who's like a huge star with Friends at the time.
Right.
And I didn't even know it existed. And so I remember watching it like at my house in the morning. And I believe my mom was around. And there's like some stuff in the first 20 minutes of this movie that you don't want your mom around for. And I remember kind of being like, oof, my kingdom for a VCR.
The entire runtime is something you don't want your mom around for, to be honest.
So that's the last time I saw it. Would have been like August of 2001.
Okay.
My last
wow.
time.
So you've had like a 24-year gap.
I tell you, I haven't thought about it too much in those intervening
years. It's aged
years.
like a fine wine, I would suggest.
There are things about it that have aged like a fine wine, I would actually say. How about you? What's your relationship with...
Well, this is the kind of movie that was right up my street in the kind of post-Tarantino heist gone wrong stuff, and so I love these two guys that are the main leads of this film, Kurt and Kevin, and the supporting cast as well. Courtney Cox, I'm a huge Friends fan, still am. You know, Christian Slater, Bokeem Woodbine, Arquette, Howie in the house.
Howie loves to come through with a helicopter midway through a movie, huh?
It's Broken Arrow too. So with him and Slater. So no, I remember I just rented it and I was like, yeah, I can see there are things about this that are definitely icky and we'll talk through them. But for the most part, I was like, man, this was a blast. And I feel like
it's an entertaining watch.
Roger Ebert was always, who I don't think liked this film, was generally always like meta film where it was supposed to be met, right? And I sort of feel it's almost a bit like, what did you expect? This is a gloriously trashy film. It's about Elvis impersonators in Vegas. It's intentionally over the top and wild. Yeah. And it was because this film was hated. I mean, it was really, really. The reviews are terrible. The director never made another film.
Damien Lichtenstein, the most interesting.
Lovers Rise Up.
I think that we've just officially jumped the shark.
I'm here.
Yeah. With respect to Damien, who's made a lot of other moving image material, you can have it. Lichtenstein. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. Bring it on. So I dig this. I dig this movie. I think it's a blast. There are things that are, there are criticisms that are valid, but for the most part, I think it's cool.
It is cool. It is cool. For sure. I read some reviews from some of our friends, some of our past guests on Letterboxd,
cool.
Including
who's in the club? Who are the Lichtenstein lovers among us?
Are there any? I regret
to
inform you.
It's a lonely road for me.
But it was interesting. Like Justin Liberty recently of, I don't know why I want to make him French, but Justin Liberty recently of Deep Blue Sea was kind of like, it is outrageous that this was set up as like an Elvis movie when the last 20 minutes have Ice-T hanging upside down with double Uzis, like killing people to like really nuts new metal from like 2001. And it cost $62 million, which adjusted for inflation is so much more than the recent Warner Brothers Elvis movie cost.
Well, there's a story behind that budget, actually.
I'm all ears. I don't know.
Apparently, it's been there's a lot of articles about how the company got in trouble for inflating their budgets, and the actual budget was $47 million.
This does seem like a movie where you're like, I'm going to fudge some numbers to make a little cash on this
It's
picture.
a strange one because it's Warner Brothers released it. Let's get into fast facts and we can sort of explain some of that.
Fast facts.
3,000 Miles to Graceland was released in the US on February 23, 2001. Directed by Damien Lichtenstein. The screenplay was by Lichtenstein and Richard Recco. Is it Rocco? My printer's a bit funny. Is it Recco?
I can check for you. Would you like me to check?
Sure.
Hang on.
Because I don't want to disrespect anyone. The printer's come out. My printer's running out of ink. I can't tell if it's an O or an E. There you go. That's the way it worked out. I made you print this script. I asked you to do it, and you were kind enough to do it, and now it's paid off.
I am the Phil now, to quote a later movie on this podcast. Screenplay by Lichtenstein and Richard Recco.
It is Recco. Okay, great. It stars Kurt Russell, Kevin Costner, Courtney Cox, Christian Slater, Bokeem Woodbine, David Arquette, Howie Long, Kevin Pollak, Thomas Hayden Church, and Ice-T. On an estimated budget of $47.4 million, which is the budget that I have, it grossed just $18.7 at the box office and was therefore considered both a critical and commercial failure upon its theatrical release. But it did gain some popularity on home video, since gone on to become something of a cult film. It's a small cult, but
yeah,
we are there banging our ashes in a swimming pool
lovers,
for this movie.
Love it. Love it.
So, yeah. Now, this was one, when I revisited it, and I enjoyed it.
Do you own this film?
I do. I do.
DVD?
Yeah, I have the British DVD, and I've had it for 20 odd years. I bought it like pretty much as soon as it came out. I was like, I love this movie.
Did you see it in the theater?
No, I rented it.
Oh, okay.
I rented it. And
Where's the 4K?
I bought it. Absolutely.
You should start a Philly special line.
I do think it should. I think it warrants, like, I would love to see, a particular physical media company, put a good release of this movie
I gotta
out.
tell you, it is one of those ones that sort of like shockingly hasn't had an actually 3,000 Miles to Graceland is good 2 days on Twitter.
Well,
kind of thing.
It's interesting. Drop Zone is suddenly like getting this new life. And I felt like I was on an island defending that one.
I was in a bar by myself, a restaurant, Saturday night, reading Jason Bailey's new book on James Gandolfini, and the man next to me chatted me up, and he was the first electrician on Drop Zone and Last of the Mohicans.
Oh, wow.
And we chatted about Drop Zone, and he was like, that got a big physical re-release? He was like, oh my God, I hope my name's in the booklet. It was kind of a fun... He's British. He was a British gentleman, and he worked on Braveheart. He worked on some big movies. And I was like, Drop Zone's back in the zeitgeist. This movie is, I don't think, as good as Drop Zone, but it has some, like,
there's stuff going on in it that I think is fun. But where I was going with this was, when I revisited it, I was very suspicious that whether this would qualify. I thought it was pretty much a reach, But to my surprise, the results came back from the lab. 61% Die Hard DNA, which qualifies.
That's right on the line. It
was edgy, but it qualifies.
Give me the facts in a segment we like to call Die Hard DNA.
I thought we were flipping this week because you were doing the script, and I was all ready.
Should we take it back? No, it's too late.
The moment's gone. So yes, Die Hard DNA. Okay, well, first of all, it revolves around a big heist, right? A group of colorful bad guys team up to pull off a big heist. And it expands into an elaborate and highly destructive cat and mouse game between two cunning adversaries. We've got elevators being rewired and repurposed.
What is he doing in that elevator?
It makes no sense. I think
no
what he's
sense.
doing,
yeah.
I think what he's doing is they need to kind of co-opt one elevator in the casinos for their exit to the roof.
That's what I thought. Okay, yeah.
So he's trying to basically take control of it so that no one else can use it, is my understanding. But because it's so frenetic of what's going on, I don't think it's necessarily 100% clear.
Yes.
There's also unscrupulous, opportunistic TV reporters. The sequence where the shootout kind of happens, and the female reporter's like, get the fucking camera, and like the guy's like dying, and she's like grabs it off him to try and it's very Dick Thornburg school of journalism. In
an edgier movie, she gets mowed down. I'm just saying.
Yeah. shooting the glass to gain a tactical advantage. During the heist, Kurt shoots glass everywhere. A pair of arrogant, rude, and largely unpleasant federal agents on the case. Here played by Kevin Pollak and Thomas Hayden Church.
Love Kevin Pollak, man. Love Kevin
Those two
Pollak.
are fun.
They need their own movie. They're in this movie for like 9 minutes.
They could have their own like cancelled TV show that ran for a season.
Yeah, exactly.
But everyone says it was the best thing ever.
It's like
right?
not as good version of Terriers, which is a show that you still. That's Philly special.
Shootouts on the roof of skyscrapers. Helicopters flying around the roof of skyscrapers. Constant cigarette smoking. Massive explosions, federal agents racing to the scene of the crisis in a helicopter. That happens at the end when everything's going crazy. And then you've got besieged buildings surrounded by cops. This all happens in the finale in the sawmill. Ambulances being used as getaway vehicles. And most interestingly to me, and this is something I want to talk about in terms of, this isn't necessarily a deep film, but there is something in it that interests me, which is this. It frequently alludes to the idea of cowboys and cowboy mythology.
Yes.
Still cowboy, Mr. McClane, Americans all alike. This film is dealing with those sort of archetypes, the cowboy, the outlaw, and, it's the Wild West, it's Vegas, etc.
Right.
And my final one was the specter of Frank Sinatra hanging over proceedings. Of course, long-time listeners will recall that the Die Hard is technically a sequel of sorts to The Detective, starring Frank Sinatra, who was originally offered the role of John McClane.
Because he had to be. He was contractually required to be offered the part.
Indeed.
He was 70.
We also can welcome to the stage the Die Hard on a Blank All-Stars. Kurt Russell, Executive Decision and Breakdown. Christian Slater, Broken Arrow and Hard Rain. Howie Long from Broken Arrow. Bakeem Woodbine from The Rock. And Ice-T from Ricochet.
When Ice-T shows up, it's like a needle drop. And like
he
just kind of walks. It's crazy to imagine a world where like Ice-T and Kevin Costner just stare at each other for 30 seconds in the finale of a movie.
I mean, how can you be mad at this movie?
Hey,
you know what I mean? Like,
Phil, you want a jelly sandwich?
I'm good.
Oh my goodness.
Let's dig into this extravaganza in a bit more detail after this quick break. And we're back with our next section of the show, Anatomy of an Action Movie, where we explore the tenets.
We live in a twilight world.
And there are no friends at dusk.
Wait, no, I want your
movie.
Elvis.
I don't. I
can't do it. I sound like a horse.
I struggle with impressions if I'm put on the spot. You know what I mean? It has to be an organic flow for me.
That's fair.
So the first tenet of Anatomy of an Action Movie is the premise. The premise of 3,000 Miles to Graceland. By the way, great title.
Yeah, very good
title. Two career criminals, Michael Zane and Thomas Murphy, played by Kurt Russell and Kevin Costner, team up to pull a casino heist in Las Vegas during an Elvis convention. However, the botched robbery results in a high body count, and in the aftermath, the psychotic, self-serving Murphy betrays Michael and the rest of the crew, sparking an expansive feud between the two men who each try to reclaim their ill-gotten gains from the other, leaving an escalating trail of carnage in their wake. And I think that the movie sort of sets that idea up with, for me, the most amazing credit sequence of CGI scorpions fighting in the desert. Like, I love it. It's so crazy. It's so of its time.
Yeah.
But I actually think it's cool because it's like saying that's what this movie is about. It's two scorpions fighting in the desert to the death.
Well, and one kills the other with a scorpion almost ultimately, right?
It's cool. I just think it's cool.
Scorpion.
You check off Scorpion, that well-known narrative device.
Scorpion that shows up in the opening credits of your movie has to appear at the end of it.
Yeah. So what are your, do you want to do should we do the defense or prosecution first here? Or do you want to have a kind of discussion in general about what this is about? Or shall I present my theory?
I'm not going to sit here
I've talked a lot.
I'm not going to sit here and badmouth this movie because ultimately it's it's like a 2.5-2-star movie for me. Right. And I think that in order to sort of let's talk about our general thoughts of it, because I have sort of a pitch for what this movie could be. Okay. And it would never get made, the version of it that I want to see. But I'd be curious to, let's start with this. I think here are the things that I wrote down that this made me think of while I was watching it. Heat.
Yep.
2 iconic American actors facing
Her
off.
name is Sybil Waingrove.
Sybil Waingrove.
I don't think that's an accident.
John Woo, double-plated
Yes.
45s, big thing. And just the kind of like extravagant, flamboyant costuming and acting, right? And like it at times it's almost without being at all at the quality level, it's almost kung fu. Guy Ritchie.
Yes.
Huge Guy Ritchie.
Was on the rise at this time.
Well, and Snatch comes out about a year before this, which I think Lock, Stock is obviously a crucially important movie, but Snatch, I think, is the one that a lot more people saw because it has Brad Pitt in it, right? And it has that really aggressive bank, a diamond heist at the beginning, which I just think is fucking amazing. But it's matched with that techno,
the intense soundtrack. Yeah.
Like, so that's in this.
Larger than life, colorful, flamboyantly dressed characters, all of that. Yeah. And
I think that there's an argument. You could tell me better, but like Guy Ritchie is kind of like, what would be the British version of like white trash in that film? Like a little bit. Those characters are kind of like they're kind of like
they're
on
exaggerated
the
working class stereotypes.
That's a better way to put it. Yeah. And then finally, and most importantly, Quentin Tarantino is all over this movie. So it feels like it's a movie made in the shadow of QT.
Definitely, and it is taking all of those influences and putting them in this crazy blender. But I think I can see why this film got made. I mean, I think it's such a great concept. It's such a fun idea of like, it makes sense. It's like a great idea for a heist. A bunch of Elvis impersonators are there. They're all going to look the same. Their outfits look cool. So it's cinematic. It's visually quite dazzling. And you get to, intercut it with the music and have that kind of, symphonic quality that Die Hard has and that some of the other Hard Boiled has and some of these other operatic movies. I just think it's like, and the title and the idea, it's just, I actually think it's quite a unique idea in some respects, though, of like 2 of the members of the gang. It's about them and their feud. You think Heat is the cop and the criminal, and Die Hard is the cop and the criminal, right? And of course, there are movies that a lot of the post-Tarantino movies were about an insular feud within a gang, I guess you could say, sort of Reservoir Dogs especially, and City of Industry, and I think some of those sort of films that did that. But to do it on this kind of scale of like a $50 million action movie that's about the cops are sort of like way down the pecking order. It's about these two, and
the cops like are almost meaningless.
Scorpions fighting. Yeah. So I just think it's really cool. And what the other thing that interests me though, beyond the obvious, and yes, it is like sort of razzle dazzle, Guy Ritchie, Tarantino, visual feast. I think if there is something going on in this film beyond the fact that all the superficial stuff, there are moments that do play with this idea of like the myth of the American West, the fact that the kid is called Jesse James, the fact that he wants to go and buy a cowboy like playset, which has 2 old-fashioned, guns and a cowboy hat. 6 shooters, yeah, thank you.
Well, and Western, this is a Western too, by the way.
Exactly.
We didn't say that, but there's a huge
It's a neo-Western, and in a way, it evokes, for me, the vibes of Harley Davidson and the Marlboro Man, which also has long sections in Las Vegas.
I didn't know you liked that movie.
Yeah, it's come up once or twice, I think.
Well, so this is...
The Federal Marshals as well, right? Like... their vibe. That's a classic Western thing, the U.S. Marshals. And the scene where the
hot in pursuit of the bad guy.
Yeah, and there's the bit that really pushes this. Sorry, and I'll yield the floor to you.
No.
Just finishing this point. There's a scene where Costner gets pulled over by the sort of brown shirted sheriff type guy, and Costner stops and goes, cowboy, and it plays the Western music, and he's spinning the gun, and that's the scene that most overtly pushes this idea.
Yeah.
So I think it's in a fun way. I think it's playing with the American obsession with cowboys and outlaws and like the battle between and the sense of like the money is there, we just got to go take it. Like at one point,
And
David
violence.
Arquette says when they're stealing the money, he goes, "God bless America."
Yeah.
There's something beneath that's actually quite interesting to me beyond the fact that it's just like a visually arresting experience. So some of that was, I'm not saying it's like it's not Unforgiven. I mean, it's not, we're not sort of peeling back the layers of the American West or anything, but I do think there is something quite interesting there. I will yield the floor to Senator Billingham.
Well, it's interesting you bring up the scene with with him getting pulled over, because I think that's like the most interesting scene in the movie, in my opinion. But because I think the framing of like the Kurt Russell learns to love and be in a relationship with Courtney Cox and her son Jesse James is like, to me, while necessary to the movie's like, arc and story, is like the least interesting thing about it, in my opinion, because you've seen it before. And in fairness, Kurt Russell's great in this movie, and Courtney Cox is really good in this movie too. Like, they're both excellent. But we mentioned Tarantino earlier, and like there's a reading of like Tarantino's movies being like just kind of about themselves and about the pastiche of like of French New Wave gangster pictures and Hong Kong action pictures. And I think his ideas and obsessions get much more interesting the older he gets. I do think that like Pulp Fiction's a very, very interesting movie, but his movies get more interesting in what they say about history and all those things. Regardless, I'm sort of fascinated by not the Kurt Russell, Courtney Cox element of the story, but the Kevin Costner as psychotic, gunslinging, delusional, thinks he's the son of Elvis, the soil of Americana, can do whatever he wants, like murders people, gets roadhead from like an underage girl in the back of the car. Like just these things. That
whole section's a problem.
Yeah, just all of these. Yeah, but just all these kinds of like, he's literally a black hat. But he's also obsessed with this Americana idea of Elvis Presley and being his son, and like, but is also like insane and cruel. And I don't think any of it's necessarily deep, but it is kind of, he's a really fascinating villain. And I want the version of this movie made by like a French auteur that's just about Kevin Costner going around murdering people and like just being a deviant in the American Southwest for like 2.5 hours. Like I'm really into that.
It reminds, the film, what you're just saying sort of reminded me of a weird film where if you did that sort of indie version of it that's like a character piece, like there's a really interesting movie called Down in the Valley with Edward Norton. Do you remember that movie?
No, I don't remember that movie.
He plays a sort of drifter that's a sort of like, and it's, I mean, I love Edward Norton and watch pretty much try and watch everything he does. And he was playing a sort of drifter cowboy that was like a very, shucks, ma'am, seems like an innocent.
I remember this.
And it's so charming. And there's sort of like suburban girls in I think, San Fernando Valley are like, oh, this guy's really cool and interesting. And then you realize that he's like not well.
Yeah.
And is a very like, he's not, it's odd and not in a good way. And so there's a version of it that could be like this really cool indie flick that's about a kind of delusional guy clinging on to some fabricated mythos about his own life to give it meaning.
Totally.
Which is interesting, but I love that it's part of this just crazy,
very American.
What Costner's doing. I mean, we're going to get to him in a minute, but his performance is spectacular in this movie.
Yeah.
It's an awesome character.
It is.
And I've never seen anything like it.
No, I've never seen anything like it. And also he's Kevin Costner. So like he's inevitably a figure associated with the American West, right? Based on, and of course, Dances with Wolves, but also Wyatt Earp and most recently the Horizon saga that he's working on.
Westerns.
There's this really wild movie that I don't necessarily encourage anyone but the hardest heads to watch called 29 Palms, which is directed by a French filmmaker named Bruno Dumont, about a couple kind of palling around in 29 Palms and in near Joshua Tree for like 2 hours. And it ends in this like, it's very dark and heavy, and it ends in this like absolutely disturbing scene of violence that I won't describe, but like that kind of is like, I kind of wish we got that version of this movie, but I do think it's made more interesting by being paired against, like, again, the Age of the Die Hard knockoff or a high octane action movie. Like, it's a really interesting pastiche, and it's clear that Damien Lichtenstein is like obsessed with a whole bunch of different types of movies. Like, it's not too far in a weird way from like Den of Thieves, which comes out later, and it's like referencing other movies, but putting all this stuff together to make its own, at times successful and at times not successful, pastiche of action cinema.
It is really interesting what you're saying about this idea of pastiche, because, you know, like Tarantino is able to sort of, especially in his early career, kind of do what some people might derisively refer to as essentially pastiche, but something about the blend makes it transcend. Even if it's not necessarily his early work, is it not necessarily about something, you know, and I mean, Pulp Fiction and True Romance are both in my top 3, you know, like all time, but I wouldn't necessarily say that they are both thematically deep films, especially Pulp Fiction's. The title is Pulp Fiction. It's saying what it's doing. It is taking a bunch of other storytelling styles from various mediums and putting them in this mixer, and this is what is coming out. But something about the presentation and and how elevated it is, how sophisticated it is, how inventive and playful it is, and how much the characters don't feel like archetypes, even though they are archetypes, right? It's the gangster's wife, the boxer that won't take the payoff. These are archetypal things, but because he makes them so dimensional.
And the writing is, dialogue is so, I mean, it's cliche to say, but the dialogue is so on point, you know.
So I think this is doing the same type of thing. It's like dime store, paperback, you know, it's taking all what are considered the lesser American art forms, you know, historically, right? Westerns were dime a dozen in the 50s and the 60s. Right. I think now we look at them maybe a little bit more differently, but these are sort of
pictures that got made, right? They were to some extent,
but it's not, for the most part, they're not considered high art necessarily.
No, you're right.
They're churning them out, right?
Well, you know what, actually, I just thought of, and it's funny that Ice-T is also in this film, is Ricochet, right? Which this movie is nothing like Ricochet, but when you have a movie that's so sort of committed to its vision, whether that vision is deep or not, you look for meaning. You try to look below the surface for the things that are going on in the movie, right? And just in the casting, I mean, the casting of Kurt Russell, who's famous for having played Elvis, and then Costner, like the great American good boy, in this role, it's really smart. And they really do. It's unfortunate that it's not, sorry to say, in my opinion, a better movie or a movie that wasn't better received, because it sort of should have, certainly, Pacino, they don't have the reputations of Pacino and De Niro, right? But they certainly are like their own, the Midwestern version of that, you know, so to speak.
Yes. They're both American icons.
Yeah.
And they're both so closely associated with the Old West, you know, and they feel like they could be from that era. They're both sort of represent a kind of timeless Americana. Let's move into that section. We'll talk about these guys. We'll start with the hero, or more accurately, the anti-hero, Kurt Russell as Michael Zane. He's basically playing a criminal here that always tries to do the right thing in a bad situation, is how it's described, I think, brilliantly. Yeah. It's Kurt. Like, he's rock solid, always.
Never bad.
Never. Like, he's so much fun in this. I like the little details about his character. Like, he doesn't like the desert. He wants to be on water. That's his kind of happy place. And it is really fun and I think quite witty casting that, you know, because he had played Elvis and whatnot, and he'd even been in a movie with Elvis when he was a kid.
Kurt's been at it forever.
Oh yeah. So I don't have like a ton to say about him, although what I did learn that was interesting. Apparently, because I'm so interested in this film, I was trying to find out like more about its production history, and there's not that much out there. But what I did learn from my research was apparently when they realized the movie was maybe in a bit of trouble in post, they had both Kurt Russell and Kevin Costner edit their own separate versions of the film, and then they tested it.
Release the Russell cut.
Well, apparently the Kurt Russell cut lent more into the romantic subplot, and the Costner cut is basically what we have, which is like an action, more into the action.
It feels
version.
a compromised movie.
Yes, and you can kind of feel that there's a lot of it. This reminds me of another movie that came out almost exactly around the same time, the Get Carter remake with Stallone.
Oh yeah,
which I actually quite like.
Never seen it.
It does this thing where it's like you can see that they've used, like, if the movie isn't working, if the story isn't working, just throw loads of fucking crazy editing in there.
Yeah,
and
make
just, like,
music
put a
videos
cool
every 40,
drop
45 minutes. Yeah, totally.
It just does like loads of flashy editing techniques to sort of try and gloss over the fact that the story isn't necessarily working as well as it should.
But that kind of works. Like, it gives it a vibe. It gives it an energy, you know? I'm not saying it's great.
Get Carter, it's a bit weird because it's like it's trying to be like this sober crime drama. Yeah. But then occasionally it's like 3,000 Miles to Graceland, but then it's a sober, contemplative drama. And then it's like fucking crazy. And that begins in Vegas as well. He's like an enforcer in Vegas. He goes to Seattle to... I
should check that out. Is Michael Caine? Is Michael Caine in it?
He is, yeah.
Okay.
He is.
I should check that out. You know, yes, I don't have too much to say about Kurt, except that he's Kurt, right? And he can do anything. Like, he's a really great actor, and I love him. And I will say, and maybe this can help get us into our Costner section, is that their first scene together is like a masterclass in acting. Like, just they like each other, but not really. They don't really trust each other.
Frenemies,
but they're putting on
they're
putting on the air of trusting each other. And I do think that, like, that is a great example of a movie that might be lesser in some ways when you let the actors do the work. You know everything you need to know about them without flashing back. There's no line that's like, well, when you screwed me back in San Jose in 1987.
He says something like look, it's a lot better than that cell we shared. Boom,
but that's
done.
it. That's all you know. That's it. Yeah, totally. Yeah. And like, so that was one of my notes, is that first scene between, I didn't write a lot down watching this movie. The first scene between Crowe and Costner is great.
I think this is one of Costner's most, like, fun performances ever. Because usually he is, he's so associated with, I think, a kind of
he's
classy,
weighted down by
movies,
morality. Yes.
And movies that are, quote unquote important or worthy, and they're often like quite long. And Dances with Wolves, very long. The new one, Horizon,
still going,
really long, still going. Yeah. Wyatt Earp, I remember that being really long. And he sort of was associated with that type of thing. Of course, he was in a bit of a weird spot in his career, right? Because this is post the sort of double whammy of the Waterworld, post the Postman, those two big flops, and him kind of being in Postman, I think, again, is also very long. I've never actually seen it.
Who rides for those movies? Our recent guest, Bill Gabiri, rides hard for Waterworld, loves Waterworld. I
like Waterworld. I think
I was wondering about this because you know what other movie he's in this year, which is like total whiplash, is 13 Days, the Kennedy movie about the Cuban Missile Crisis,
which is a phenomenal
movie. It's a very good movie. Yeah.
It's one of my favorite movies.
Are you a fan of that movie?
I'm a huge fan of that movie.
Yeah, it's an interesting. I grew up in my dad had a framed painting of Kennedy on the wall, but and growing up, so like I remember that was like a big deal when that movie came out.
It's like. It should be given to people to be like, this is why the Kennedys were great.
Yeah, I should rewatch it.
Bobby Kennedy Sr., is one of my greatest political heroes ever. And a lot of my education about him was through that film. And I think the actor who plays him is like, I've seen almost every version of the Kennedys.
Who's the actor? Is it...
It's Stephen Culp, isn't it?
Yeah, I think you're right about that. Let me look, because I wanted to ask you, to come back to the point of this big point here, is that like, I was wondering what was going on in Costner's career that he made this movie at this time. Because, as you just said, he's done... So 99 is Message in the Bottle, For the Love of the Game. Those are two...
So this is in his weird sort of like mid-level studio. He's still a star, but these movies aren't like setting the world on fire. But he's still doing stuff that are sort of down the middle, safer movies. Right?
Right.
They're not gonna cost what Waterworld or The Postman are costing. It's like a mid-level romantic dramas type. Okay, safe. Let's keep it safe for a little bit.
And then he does Dragonfly and Open Range. So yeah, it's a little bit of a weird time in his career, and he probably needed like. I mean, maybe he needed a hit, maybe he needed a paycheck, who knows? But he really does do something interesting.
It's interesting because it sort of reminds me of like what Tom Cruise was sort of doing around this time, where he was taking, and Tom Cruise had not had like huge flops. He's always been like right up there more or less. He had kind of one wobble for a few years, but for the most part, he's always been right at the top. But around the same time, Cruise is doing really risky performances in Eyes Wide Shut, Magnolia, Vanilla Sky, and Collateral.
One of the great runs.
Right? And Costner is also doing something that I think very like against type. And risky, like a very risky performance. If this goes wrong, you know, I mean, some people might feel that it you know, this is that it did go wrong. I don't think so. I think he's phenomenal in this, whether you like the movie or not. I don't think
he's very good.
Anything other than like ultimate charisma.
He really underplays it too. You know, like he doesn't go for it. You know what movie this made me think of? I wrote down A Perverted Perfect World.
Oh, yes. Great
Which
movie.
is a movie.
Great movie.
Have I ever told you that I saw that movie and it ended and an hour later I started sobbing and I couldn't stop for hours? Like it destroyed. I will not rewatch it. It's really messed me up. But like, I like how a couple years later he comes back and he's playing punch buggy with the kid and he just basically punches him right in the face when he's playing punch buggy. Like, like it really.
He's a jerk. His character's awful.
He's a sadist.
So charismatic.
I mean, when he's trying to run their car down and like Courtney Cox is driving, like that's a horrible scene.
Yeah,
it's well staged, but it's like horrible to watch. And it's literally black hat and white hat to some extent, right? He's the black hat to Crow's. Excuse me, not Crow's.
Perfect World is such an interesting comp to this because Perfect World, I think, is also about, and this is what Clint Eastwood, we referenced Unforgiven, right? Clint Eastwood wrestled his entire career with the notion of the American West and the notion of the myths about marshals and outlaws,
good point,
and cowboys and criminals and all of this type of stuff, right? And Perfect World is like a really intimate drama about that, where, Costner is the sort of lovable outlaw, and Clint plays the marshal that's after him, right? And Clint being, and we'll see this when we get to The Rookie, actually a very generous actor, is quite willing to sort of cede. He directed that movie as well, but he's also ceding like the lead to another actor.
Well, and he has to
Clint's
be like
amazing.
The parent to the cool uncle. Like I think about this all the time, how like when you're around your kids and they're around like an uncle that lets them do whatever we want, and you're like, don't do that. Like you're kind of you're the authority figure, right? And yeah, it's really interesting. But I do like that a couple of years later, Costner makes this movie where he's like a piece of shit to a kid that he has taken hostage.
Yeah.
Very funny.
I mean, he's making really risky choices. There's a bit in it that I think's hilarious, where he's doing the magazine survey and he ticks the thing to say that he's trisexual. Like, there's some. It's
very funny.
He's doing some really like outrageous, quirky, like making big swings. Do you have a
favorite Kevin Costner performance?
That is a great question. I do really love 13 Days. I mean, would I put that as my greatest? And there's so many, of course, JFK as well. 13 Days is a more conventional historical piece. JFK is a kind of crazy fever dream. Field of Dreams, of course.
For me, it's either JFK, where she has the impossible job of being the Frank Capra figure in like a totally twisted movie. But also, I just think he's so good in The Untouchables.
Yes. I mean, I could, I'd list all of his things. I do have one. I just want to quickly check that I named the actor correctly for 13 Days.
Stephen Culp. Yep, I checked it.
Was I right? That
yes,
it was Stephen Culp? Because I watch all of the Kennedy adaptation thing, almost all of them. And for me, he's the best I've ever seen. He like nailed Bobby Kennedy, how he played it. It was an amazing performance. And Bruce Greenwood playing as JFK was also astonishing. I recommend that film. I can't recommend it highly enough. It's amazing.
Bruce Greenwood, besides having been referenced on this podcast before in a little movie called Passenger 57, is an amazing actor and is in one of my favorite movies that nobody has seen, which makes me really sad. from 2010 called Meek's Cutoff, which is an absolutely amazing neo-Western directed by Kelly Reichardt and starring Michelle Williams, Bruce Greenwood, Paul Dano, Zoe Kazan, Will Patton. About you got to watch it, about a family going west. It is a anti-Western and absolutely amazing, total masterpiece. So check it out if you ever.
I just want to. I'll tell what my one Costner story. It's not one of the I didn't say I knew him. He touched me on the shoulder once stories, but it was my one of the reasons why I'll always love him. So several years ago. My dad comes out to visit and here in LA, and he'd never been to a baseball game. So I was like, well, let's go. You know, this is like an iconic American experience. And
the greatest.
It's just so happened that the game that we had got tickets for was Vin Scully's last game. And before the game, Costner comes out in the middle of Dodger Stadium and does this speech that was the most spine-tinglingly beautiful, like if you could bottle Americana in its most majestic, magical way. And Field of Dreams music is playing as he's doing this.
Wow.
And he speaks about Vince Scully saying, you know, and you're in our cars and your backyards with the way he would, you know, and you've been a part of our life and a gift to America and a gift to baseball. And I swear to God, there are hard tattooed men are all everywhere around us weeping.
Well, that's the power of Kevin fucking Costner.
Exactly. Yeah. Right. It's the power of Costner to it was unbelievable to watch this.
Yeah.
You know, and I have it on video. So for me, it's one thing watching him in all of these movies be amazing, but seeing in person, as it were, and having the whole of Dodger Stadium in the palm of your hand without raising your voice, very special.
Well, that makes me think of sort of the scene in The Untouchables when he's like, I know that many of you have had a drink, right? Like he has this air of goodness and authority about him. And so to see him pervert it in this movie is like pretty cool.
It's really interesting. So I love it. I love him in this. Let's talk about the lady.
Whoa, she's a lady.
So Courtney Cox,
huge star at this moment, maybe the biggest star in the movie, because like Kurt and Costner
maybe
are there,
hottest star, arguably.
For sure.
You know,
definitely
in terms of like where she was in her career, predominantly television, but huge. You know, not to say like Kurt Russell's always been like pretty solid. Costner in a bit of a weird moment, but she is like, she's huge right now. She's like America's sweetheart,
and,
right?
You know, this movie doesn't have great gender politics,
to say the least.
They don't treat her like an idiot.
Yeah. She's
not an idiot. She begins the film as a femme fatale before turning into something very different. Shades of, Red Rock West a little bit in the opening.
Yeah, another great neo-Western. The sexual politics of this film are really bad. I mean, every woman is portrayed as a schemer and a tramp who can't wait to run off with the latest outlaw that like passes by, you know. But it is playing with, like I say, this sort of trashy paperback kind of these ideas. Well, I'm not sure if it is. I'm not sure if it is. Well, it's certainly with regards to the sexual politics. I think it's actually the most appalling one is this character of Megan, played by Daisy McCracken, who is just this sort of wastrel waif who is passed from Costner to a biker gang. That bit was like even when I watched that when it came out, I was like pretty disgusted by that whole just like a piece of meat. Like, here you go. Yeah, you know, I found that pretty repellent.
It's gross. It is reflective though of like that kind of mentality, right? And, you know, but the movie isn't like smart or self-aware about that. I think, unfortunately, it just does it.
No, she's got no agency either.
Yeah, right? You're right.
So
That's
it's pretty disempowering what's going on with that character. It's pretty gross.
I agree.
But the Courtney Cox, I think it's kind of she's actually quite a versatile actress.
Yeah.
You know, but she's so closely associated, I think, with the character in Friends, which, you know, started off, and I love Friends. So, you know, it started off, the first series was somewhat naturalistic in terms of how the characters were, you know, and her thing was she was uptight and neurotic. as it went on, they turned up the volume and all that, and it got increasingly kind of exaggerated. But that was her character. She was like just a normal person who was uptight and neurotic, and was a chef, right? And so
she was also acting against Lisa Kudrow and Jennifer Aniston, who are like, Kudrow's like the kooky one, and Jennifer Aniston is like kind of the bombshell of that show to some extent, right? So it's like she's this weird middle ground of these in their dynamic.
And everyone on that show is like a comic genius in their own way, and it was lightning in a bottle, right?
Rest in peace, this Matthew Perry.
I know. This character is night and day from her character in Friends, is my point. So I think it's like a cool choice. Like, oh, wow, like this kind of white trash, single mom, kind of a schemer, kind of an opportunistic, pretty sexually open, as it turns out. She sort of jumps into bed with Kurt Russell. I mean, who can blame her?
I can't.
the first opportunity.
I certainly can't.
But you know, she's fun in the movie, and I believe she was married to David Arquette at the time, which is
he better come up in some awards. That's all I have to say.
I'm sure he will. Should we move on to the action?
Yeah,
action section. The action in this movie, I think, is pretty strong. You know, like it's a muscular action movie. It doesn't necessarily have like a set piece. I mean, I will say, look, the Vegas heist.
Yeah,
that whole section. I rewatched that whole section with the first sort of 25 minutes. I think it's gangbusters, man. I think it's dynamite.
Yeah, it works really well.
Bit.
It stays a few minutes ahead of you, which I think is very smart as an audience member. You know, you're not like clued in on what they're doing. You kind of figure it out. It is crazy how much it's sold as an Elvis movie when it's really not an Elvis movie at all. You know what I mean? Like there's a lot of that element of it. But no, I think the first 20 minutes are good. I think the action is good. I think this movie, and we sort of addressed this earlier in that like there was post-production woes with this movie, it's just like cut to the gills. Like it's chaos. And I don't always think that chaos results. Look, I'm a big fan of people like standing far apart from each other shooting guns. Like that's like my favorite kind of, I love that shit. But it's a little like chaotic in its editing and its shape in that regard. And I think it does diminish the power of some of the individual action scenes. That said, I still think it's like a pretty exciting watch. Yeah.
It kind of works you into a frenzy. I mean, that bit, once it gets, there's a lot of sort of build up, and you know, the movie, if you were unfamiliar with it, and you did think it was an Elvis movie, I think it's quite clever because the joke is they're a band going on stage to perform, right? They're not. Then they make comments like, "Oh, they're good on stage," and I'm the guitarist, and blah blah blah. They they get the guitar cases and everything, and the idea is that they're going to be on stage, but actually they're pulling a heist, which is fun. But once it kicks in and there's this amazing needle drop of the vapor trail by the Crystal Method, and it's just like the shots of Vegas, and like the beat comes in, and it's like they get. I mean, I'm sorry, but that is fucking cool.
It's
like
cool.
when the five guys are like lining up down that. I can't remember the name of that alley and that section of Vegas where there's like stuff on the roof.
I don't know either.
Lights on the roof, and they're walking towards the camera, and it's like all of these badass guys in their outfits, and the music's pounding. I'm like, yes, man. And then the heist happens. It kind of works you into a frenzy. There's one shot in this sequence because some of the editing, I think, as I say, is just chaos. But there's one moment in it that I find very haunting that really stayed with me. I wonder if it resonated with you. But once the heist is starting to spiral out of control, and it's just like gunfire on the casino floor. It repeatedly cuts back to these two characters who are in the sort of security hub.
Yeah,
and, it's a young black woman and a heavier set older white guy. And they obviously are colleagues, and they have a kind of chummy relationship. And at first, when the lights go out or in the elevator, he's like, "Oh, it's probably a couple screwing, but we'll go check it out." But then when it goes really bad, there's one shot of her face when she clings onto his arm.
I remember that. Yeah,
it's really effective, like how it's edited, and as they kind of realize, like, "Oh my gosh, this is so bad, and this is so out of control."
But is that indicative of like a tonal problem that I do think persists in this movie, which is like, and when I say that, like, I actually like movies that like kind of do whatever they want, but like half the time it's fun and half the time it's like a Hollywood movie, like half the time it's fun and half the time it's brutal. And like, you know what it reminds me of a little bit is From Dusk Till Dawn. The scene in From Dusk Till Dawn when Clooney cuts back from getting the groceries and Richie has murdered, and like it turns it into a different movie really for dark, about 10 minutes, right? Like that works well because of what that first hour of that movie is like a different movie than the second hour of that movie. And like I do think that like purely from like this movie sometimes like that Costner serial killer kind of plot versus the like Russell Crowe romantic subplot, like they kind of Kurt Russell, thank you. Yeah, it just doesn't quite like, it never just quite gels. And I think that's part of the problem, is that it's tonally a little all over the place. But I do think that moment is powerful. Yeah, but it shouldn't be there. You are,
yeah, it's a good point, because in the same sequence, it's cutting to a sort of stereotypical old lady pulling the slot machine thing, like the one-armed bandit. But I know what you mean. Like, I think technically you're totally correct. Like the two things are tonally in opposition. But for me, because the whole thing is just such a crazy kind of stew of crazy weird spices, like spices. I'm all for it. Sure. I'm like, this movie is intentionally over the top.
Right.
So, and it does veer between like sort of more serious moments and largely like very exaggerated moments and stuff.
Yeah.
But for me, that just the combination of factors, like for some reason it does work, even though you're totally right. I could objectively say that doesn't work. Like which one is it? Like, are you serious or are you not serious? I don't mind it.
I also don't like to sound like I'm a guy giving studio notes. Like this relates to a conversation we had on 48 Hours of Buddy Movies, patreon.com/48 Hours of Buddy Movies, about Red Heat and how like you can love a movie outside of its story. And I feel similarly that like I go into a movie like really wanting to trust the director 150%. So like if there's a tonal mistake, I'm interested in, or if there's a tonal shift, I shouldn't even say mistake. As a viewer and as like a artist and as like a fan of all different types of cinema, I want to have the experience that the director's giving to me. Or the filmmaker, that's the most important thing, right? So when I make these notes, like it often comes off as like I'm talking about product, right? But there is this like whole idea of the well-made film. And that to me is like kind of about unity and all the elements cohering together. And so I struggle with the coherence, I guess I should say, of moments of the juxtaposition of these two people being upset that their coworkers are being mowed down, and also like the old gambling addicted, like slightly demented woman, right? Like they're two different things a little bit.
Totally. You're totally right. And most times, within the first 5 minutes, does the director have a firm hold on this movie? And a lot of that is down to tone. And I think that's weirdly something that a lot of directors, especially emerging directors, don't actually get or can't execute. It sounds obvious, but a lot of people struggle, especially when films do involve funny moments, or films often are a mixture of there's a funny moment, there's a sad moment, there's an action moment, there's the blah blah blah. There's a mixture of different emotions, but getting the tone to feel consistent, actually quite a hard skill. I would agree with you. This film is tonally inconsistent and crazy.
Offer a compliment?
I just don't care because I just dig it.
Well, let me offer a compliment to Damien Lichtenstein. Your directorial debut as a feature filmmaker, having Kevin Costner, Kurt Russell, Russell Crowe, having Kevin Costner, Kurt Russell, Courtney Cox, Bokeem Woodbine, David Arquette, like John Lovitz for 10 minutes, and
cast is stacked.
He could have gotten real conservative with the movie he made, and he did not. Like he goes for whatever else you may think about this movie.
Fences.
He swings for the fences and makes like a movie in bad taste and in bad taste to some extent, and like he's not afraid of that.
I think intentionally.
Oh yeah. I'm almost, there's no...
For the large part, some of it is like, no, that's just straight up bad taste. Like the waif being passed to the motorcycle gang, that's just bad taste.
Well, it's just gender politics.
The whole thing is
nasty.
playing, yeah, but it's also playing with the idea of bad taste. Vegas is the most. Vegas is bad taste.
Well, Vegas is like a simulacra
Elvis conventions aren't exactly,
Yeah.
it's not the Met Gala, like.
Yeah, well, we could talk about the taste.
Talk about the taste of that as
Did
well.
you see Emil Antoninsky's fit
I did.
at the
That's
Met
what made
Gala?
me think about it.
We should probably
that's a
share
bad
that.
example
Yeah,
because
but
I
no,
could care less
well,
about that bullshit.
It's like it's high and low culture, right? Like that's really what it is. Like
That's
and
better
who
put,
decides
yes.
that is arbitrary and those I can like you can enjoy both and sort of see the value in both. And like I sometimes look at that high art stuff and I'm like, well, this is just silly. But artists are making it in the same way that like making bad taste art requires artistry as well, right?
Yes.
Like one of the great movies of all time is Face Off, and that movie veers into like insane operatic. There are people watch that movie and they're like, that movie goes like way too far. But like, I can appreciate and admire
question the taste of Face Off.
Yeah.
Like, if I were to let you suck my tongue, would you be grateful? The whole cast of Troy. Nicolas Cage is like constantly riding the line of taste.
Oh my! Well, and he's an artist.
That's what makes it like fascinating to watch.
Did you see his Letterboxed top 4 that he did?
I did, yeah,
oh my God, amazing! He's a man
the
of
greatest.
such taste.
But I think maybe what we're trying to say is like bad taste doesn't necessarily mean bad art.
No, totally. And
right,
it
can, but not. It's not a prerequisite.
No, and it to some extent these things are arbitrary.
Yes, yeah, and it's somewhat in the eye of the beholder. But I just sort of feel like largely this film is a bit misunderstood and mistreated, given like what did you think this was going to be? This is about like a crazy action heist movie about Elvis impersonators in Vegas, and the volume's turned up to 11, and it's a blast.
Right. I mean, it is a little outside of Kevin Costner's normal thing, right? And he's the top line star of this movie, right? But at the same time, I hear what you're saying. Very quickly, can I recommend... This is a movie I want you to watch, but one of the great unlikely duo of precocious child and badass protector is Gloria, the Jenna Rowlands starring film directed by John Cassavetes, which has the most amazing child performance. Like, what do you think, lady? Like, really, this kid going for it.
It's Christmas. You could steal City Hall.
Like that, exactly. This, like, ethnically hilarious little boy giving, like, Jenna Rowlands, the goddess, a hard time for 2.5 hours where she's, like, killing gangsters. Fucking rocks, dude. Anyways.
I know it's a deeply heralded movie, and you've definitely Cassavetes pilled me in a good way.
The Paris number. The Paris number.
But Sonny, I can't understand it.
The greatest. We gotta go on like a Killing of a Chinese Bookie location tour. Like find all those spots. They're probably all gone, but like I don't know.
Cosmo.
I wanna live in Cosmo
character.
Vitelli's world for
Amazing.
one night.
Oh, the best. Let's wrap things up for this section with the humor. Because I think there's some really funny bits in this. Was there a particular like moment or line or scene that tickled you in this one?
Yeah, there's two. The punch buggy or whatever he says when he punches the kid in the face, I think is very funny because that kid just needs a slap upside the head. And then the second one is when he murders the wombat fan and
it's genius. That sequence
dresses up at him.
Go Wombats!
I'm like, what is the thing? He's like, I got a new slogan. It's like fuck them or whatever he says. Like it's just, I think that's really funny.
Incredible, that scene.
And it's like a little less funny in an obvious way, but like Lovitz and his the attractive woman that works for him and just the kind of creepy John Lovitz element of that. I find like John Lovitz for me is like Gilbert Gottfried, like half speed. Like I find I can spend more time with him, and I just, like John Lovitz showing up on screen like makes me laugh.
Yeah, and also was in Friends as well.
Right.
Was in a couple of episodes as the stone restaurateur.
I forgot about that.
Well, he's another guy that sort of his whole comedy comes from making you uncomfortable.
Yeah.
It's interesting. Yeah, I agree that the Costner wombat sequence is hysterical.
I really wish I'd written down that like thing that
I've got a new thing like greasy. We beat their fucking team easy. Something like that. Right?
Like it's amazing.
Fun. It's incredible.
Well, and also it's like it speaks to his versatility.
Yeah. Like,
I don't know how he paints his face.
It's so
that quickly.
wacky.
Yeah, and he just murders this old man. Yeah, it's wild.
It's just awesome. So much fun. It does struggle to find the right tone at times with some of the comedy. There are comedy scenes I think that don't work. The one that really I find like cringy is where David Arquette, and the actors are committed to it. The actors are giving it their best, but it's the bit where David Arquette, apropos of nothing, is like, okay, celebrity death match, Sinatra versus Elvis Presley. It's just like, this wouldn't happen. This is forced.
I like David Arquette, and I cannot fucking stand him in this movie.
Really?
I want him to disappear from the proceedings.
Interesting.
I think it's actually a real mistake to start off with this totally.
You don't buy him as a badass. Like,
no, but that's why I like him a little. You know who you buy as a badass is Christian motherfucking Slater.
He's so wasted in this.
Yeah, and I mean,
barely in it.
Yeah, I love Christian Slater. You know, this movie also doesn't do itself a favor that it begins with the
what
iconic.
What happened to your voice there, by the way? I just need to unpack.
I love him. Oh, I love Christian Slater. Oh, baby. But the way it begins with the Morgan freak, dun 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 dun
yes.
dun dun dun, immediately is Robin Hood for me. So it's Kevin Costner and Christian Slater like that, and that movie's like a B- movie.
Throw that out of the trivia. Yeah.
Oh shit! Sorry.
It's all right.
Die Hard in Nottingham. Michael Kamen score. Anyway, we got off top here.
I think that's sort of the humor is as erratic as the rest of the film. Some of it works and is hysterical, and some of it sort of like is a dud or is just a bit odd.
Swinging,
but it's taking big swings, and you can't blame it. You can't blame it for that. You know, like not everybody. The best batters in the world only bat 300, whatever.
Yes.
Let's move into the Die Hard Oscars. We'll grab our Elvis costumes and our guitar cases. Your Elvis is all right. By the way, your Arnold on the Red Heat episode, excellent.
Thank you.
No notes.
Your luggage.
The John McClane Yippee-Ki-Yay Award for Best Line. I had three. There's some pretty good zingers in this. The three that I picked are slightly random. There was a bit that it made me laugh out loud. It's when Kevin Pollak playing Marshall Dametry, the guy, the black guy that is the other Elvis impersonator who they were interrogating, who gives him a light, and it's like just gigantic flame, and he just quips very casually, "Need some spot welding done?" Like it's just very funny. Like that Pollak dry humor. The line about Ice-T where Jack goes, "Meet Hamilton." And Costner as Murphy goes, "I said get a couple of guys, Jack, a couple of guys." And he goes, "He is a couple of guys."
Yeah, that's good.
But the one that was a little bit more, again, reaching for something slightly higher in terms of like playing around with mythology of outlaws and so forth, is when Michael Zane, Kurt Russell says, "Guys like me die caught, guys like you die bloody." That's
a great line. There's a couple good lines in there that are good. That's a good one. There's also the line about like you always do the right thing in a bad situation. Yes. I think is a pretty good line. You know, I think the humor in this movie for me comes more from the situations and stuff like that. But I'm gonna go with the wombat, what the greasy. We fucking beat him easy. Like it's just so absurd and funny that I think that would be my pick. But I do think the that line about "you die bloody" is like, it's kind of crazy. It's
kind of poetic, actually.
Yeah,
there's like this white trash poetry.
It's crazy that there's this movie that came out in like 2001 that just happens to pit these two like American icons against each other, and like maybe it's not a great movie, but nobody talks about it.
It is, and it is a great movie, and I do, I don't know, man. I'm so sort of sentimental about these things. I'm grateful this exists.
Sure.
I'm grateful that Kurt Russell and Kevin Costner, there will be a time when we'll be like, how cool is it that this movie exists?
Yeah.
I feel like that when I'll get into this when we do Tango and Cash on the Patreon.
www.patreon.com/48 hours of buddy movies.
When two icons combine, it can be, it's like, just be grateful. Like, if you don't like it, don't watch it.
Yeah.
But just be grateful it's there for the people that do dig it.
Well, it's just cool. I mean, I feel that way about most things. Like, I'm glad that, art-wise, there's a lot of things I wish didn't exist, but I do think art-wise, like, yeah, no, for sure. I think, and like, yeah, it's like, one of the things that's fun about the show is we get to revisit these movies and we don't have to love them, but you can appreciate, like, this is all part of a larger project of you know, the golden age of action movies.
And for me, it's about giving them a fair shake.
Right.
You know, like this movie was maligned immediately, and I just don't feel like it was fairly treated. You know, I get why people didn't like it. It's out there. It's weird. It's wacky. It's tonally kind of batshit. But, you know, there are people that like it, and there's more there than people might think.
Sure.
The Hans Gruber Exceptional Thief Award for stealing the film. I mean, this is Costner's movie, I think, all day.
Yeah.
But outside of the two leads, and Kurt Russell's obviously great, but, you know, Costner has the flashier part.
He's got the villain part. He's got the Heath Ledger
so
part
fun.
to some extent, right?
Yes. So I've got Courtney Cox as Sybil, Howie Long as Jack. I will say, like, Howie Long, you know, not an actor, came from the NFL. Very good death scene. Like, he's acting is very solid, actually, to give him
It's interesting that he did these, like, I mean, I know Broken Arrow is slightly more elevated, but these kind of like, he did like a lot of trashy action movies.
His acting got better by like, because he's not.
You the man, Deke.
Yeah, he looks the part, but he hasn't kind of like honed his craft yet. But this one, he's got pretty decent. And I watched a movie that he did called Firestorm, which I wanted to ask Kyle Brandt if he would come back for it. But it just didn't, it wasn't a Die Hard movie, and it wasn't good. And that was Howie Long's one shot at like sort of stardom as an actor. He's decent.
Did Howie, well, I guess not really. I was going to say, did Howie Long walk so that John Cena could run? Because there's something sort of similar in them. But I think Cena's like a much more like, he's a wrestler. Yeah. So then the entertainment level is like, he's just has a different stage.
Well, we'll be talking about They Live on the Patreon with Roddy Piper.
Yeah,
I think delivers a great performance.
Where are we going to be talking about it?
Oh, what? Our Patreon?
Oh, is that
Patreon.com/48 hours of body movies. Has that come up? I'll get told off by my dad if I keep doing that.
Patreon.com/48 hours of body movies.
Ice-T as Hamilton, Kevin Pollak as Marshall Dametry, and we haven't really talked about him, but we need to. Thomas Hayden Church as Marshall Quigley. So who would be your pick and why for
I want to give it
Exceptional Thief?
Wait, the kid's not on the list?
I haven't got him on. He's good. I mean, the character's annoying.
Great in this movie, though. But his is the.
But you feel sorry for him. His circumstances suck.
He is the arc. He's the one at the end who drops the guns off the boat at the very end of the movie. I'm gonna call
shedding the outlaw myth.
Exactly.
The myth of the outlaw being a good thing. He sheds that.
Yeah,
in
exactly.
That moment.
I'm giving it to that kid because I think he's annoying, but like the character's annoying. The
character's annoying. No, the actor is good. What's his name?
He's still acting. I looked him up. He's still an actor. His name is. I will give it to you. Just let me get there. Vamp. Have you visited our Patreon? It's patreon.com/48 hours of buddy movies. And the role is played by a very
David Kay as Jesse Waingrove.
So that kind of blew my mind because my great college professor was David Kay. I was like, I don't remember my college professor being in this movie. But yes, David Kay, and he's still an actor. He's still acting.
That's great. He's done quite a lot of stuff. Fair enough. Good choice. I'm going to go for, because we haven't had a chance to talk about him, I'm going to go with Thomas Hayden Church as Marshall Quigley. You know what this kind of reminded me of? And obviously, the example I'm going to cite is a vastly superior film. Stephen Lang in Public Enemies. You know, he's like, it's like he evokes this sort of, again, the American myth, and we've talked about this in like Last Man Standing, like with the character who's like the Texas Ranger. These aren't Texas Rangers; they're, I believe, U.S. Marshals.
Yes,
but that idea, right, of like the line stops here kind of guys, you know, that are like only the real hard cases can handle criminals. You know, kind of like it takes a criminal to catch a criminal, like the sort of real tough. They're cut from the same cloth essentially, which is also very Klein and Gruber and Rickman talked about how he felt that even though they were so different in terms of their class and cultures that they were from, that that Gruber and McClane were actually quite of a similar breed.
I love.
And there's something interesting about this character. There are some bits in it that I really hate in just with the dialogue he's given.
Big
where
breasts and small, like
that bit
so
is
stupid.
What is that? It's so juvenile. A lot of the sexuality discussions in this film are so juvenile and puerile. When he turns up and he's like, "Are you guys the marshals?" And he's like, "Well, if we're not, we better give these fuckers back, huh?" And I'm like, "Oh gosh!" But Thomas Hayden Church, being great, still finds ways. I love the bit again, speaking to the sort of the myth idea at the end when he sort of says, "I'm glad he didn't give up. I wouldn't have."
Yeah, that's a good line. It's such what a weird movie. Yeah,
it harks back to that line: "Guys let you die court, guys let me die court, guys let you die bloody." There's again that idea of like going down in a blaze of glory, right? Like, which was literally the Young Guns song. Yeah, is romanticized in American culture.
Yeah, we love a lone gunman kind of mentality. I just want to very quickly say that one of my favorite line readings in the history of movies is not in this movie, but is Kevin Pollak in The Usual Suspects when they say, "We can put you in Queens on the night of the robbery," and he says, "Really? I live in Queens. What do you have, a team of monkeys working around the clock on this?" Kevin Pollak is a goat.
He's great at sass.
Yeah, love him.
The Dick Thornburg Award for Dick of the Movie, if we exclude Kevin Costner as Thomas J. Murphy, who is a huge dick.
Stinks.
Christian Slater as Hanson, David Arquette as Gus, Paul Anka as the aggressive casino boss who hates Elvis. There's some interesting facts about him.
Paul Anka,
David A.K. as Jesse Waingro, the kid, and John Lovitz as Jay Peterson. Who you got for Dick of the Movie?
I just got to give it to. I actually think Christian Slater's character is very reasonable. He's kind of like, you're a fucking psycho. I think it's got to go to Lovitz just to give John Lovitz a little love. It's in this movie. I think John Lovitz. It's like crazy that he shows up for like 11 minutes.
Yes, and a fun, and again, it's sort of example of like the film's sort of tonal chaos. Is like John Lovitz brings a certain quality to the table, and it isn't naturalism for the most part.
But he's good in it.
No, he's great. He's always fun. He always puts a smile on your face. So check this out. The one character where I thought, wow, I really buy you in this world was the guy who was the casino boss, and he has a little scene where he says, I don't know what the big deal is about Elvis. That Pork has been dead for 20 years. And he's like shitting on Elvis and other people are defending him and stuff. And there was something about him where I was like, I don't know what it is, but you fit in this world. And I absolutely buy you as like a terrifying casino boss. And when the shit goes down, he is out there. Like someone's throwing him an automatic weapon and he's like, feels like he's comfortable with it. And you could believe that he's a guy that like shoots targets in the desert and is like frightening.
Right.
Like defending his little fiefdom there, right? So I was like, who is this actor? Because he's really like, he's really good in this part. So his name is Paul Anka.
He's hugely
A-N-K-A.
famous.
He was a writer for Sinatra. He wrote My Way.
Yeah, no, dude, I grew up maybe I grew up with Paul Anka, like
I didn't know who he was.
No, I was about to say maybe this is like an American English thing.
Yeah,
but
okay,
Paul
maybe.
Anka, like, yeah, dude. I mean, like, my parents listened to a lot of like, contemporary oldies or whatever. I don't know how to describe it, but like, I grew up with Paul Anka. Like, he's a residual part of American culture because like Vegas shit gets exported all over the country, right? So like, Paul Anka, like when he came on screen, I was like, oh, it's Paul Anka. Look, he's in this movie.
He's like instantly recognizable.
Yeah,
okay,
for sure. Instantly, I'm probably the last generation that will be like, it's Paul Anka, unless you're raised with it, right? Like my kids aren't going to know who Paul Anka is, but I did for sure. My dad loved Sinatra, loved him. So
me too. I'm more of a Sinatra guy than I am an Elvis guy.
Mm-hmm.
I love Sinatra's music, and I love the Rat Pack and all of that stuff.
Yeah, that's
and
Philly
also goes hand in hand with the Kennedys and everything.
Mm-hmm.
Final award, and it's a pretty good one this week. It's the best death presented by Mark.
Oh, no more table. Next time you have a chance to kill someone, don't hesitate.
Pretty good. like the film, you commit.
Yeah, well,
committing to the moment.
Well, we haven't had a good best death in a while because
we haven't. We've had to be
serious pictures.
Yeah, we had to kind of limp around it with a couple of serious movies. So in this one, we've got Franklin, played by Bokeem Woodbine, who is shot during the heist and his body tossed from the helicopter, a la Scarface or Toy Soldiers. Hanson, played by Christian Slater, who is shot in the leg and then the chest by Murphy after quabbling about the money. Hamilton, played by Ice-T.
How does a murderer
by
kill?
This character?
Yeah, definitely. Lin-Manuel Miranda, very famous 3,000 Miles to Graceland.
Well, like your theory about Sydney, played by Philip Baker Hall, being that's the Hard Eight is a Midnight Run spin-off.
Well, there is
Lin-Manuel Miranda's Hamilton inspired by the Ice-T character.
Total digression, but there is a podcast reference in the musical Hamilton.
Okay.
To a podcast called My Brother, and Me, which is if you're a big nerd, you got when you were Anyway, it doesn't matter. Wow, we're all jeez.
Well, Ice-T's character Hamilton has a pretty cool. He's shot to death by the feds after his acrobatic assault, where he's like very Cirque du Soleil.
This inspired Cirque du Soleil. That's where the Cirque du Soleil came from. Is this?
This very influential film, Murphy's Last Stand and Death Rattle, where that sequence is pretty great. There's some shots in that where he's got this massive gun, and in the background, are like big explosions. In the foreground, in the same shot, is Costner there with the gun. Like, it's really well staged and shot and choreographed, I think.
Yeah, so, that would be my pick.
That'd be my pick.
Yeah,
he goes down hard, and it's pretty cool. Let's take one final break, and then we'll be back with the Double Jeopardy trivia quiz, where the scores can really change. And we're back with our final section of the show, the Double Jeopardy trivia quiz.
Now I sound like Mr. Ed. I've gone too far.
Unfortunately, almost all of my trivia came up this week, which is an occupational hazard.
Sorry.
But
let's do it anyways. Let's see.
We'll do it anyway.
Why
Maybe
not?
People weren't paying attention.
Yeah.
All right, question number one. They probably skipped through most of the shit
I just want the quiz. Give me the fucking quiz.
Question number one.
Yeah.
Cast members Kevin Costner and Christian Slater previously appeared together as fellow outlaws in which 1991 film?
Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, which, can we have a brief, this is why this is a good quote. We had a brief moment where we were like, should we have covered this movie?
Yeah,
because
we probably should have,
We probably should have, but here's my one reservation. To go from like basically Die Hard to that movie would just be such a weird jump, because like its commonalities are Alan Rickman giving what is largely a very similar performance, right? Yeah. And then the Michael Kamen score, right? There's some other stuff too, but like, it's fine. We didn't cover it. I happen to be a huge fan of that movie. It's a real fun swashbuckler, but yeah, I don't know. Die Hard in Nottingham. Maybe someday we'll go back and we'll do it for fun.
Yeah. Question number two. Kurt Russell has numerous connections to Elvis Presley and even appeared opposite him on screen in the 1963 film It Happened at the World's Fair. But in which 1994 Oscar-winning epic does Kurt Russell provide the voice of Elvis?
Clue?
The film starred Tom Hanks and was directed by Robert Zemeckis.
Forrest Gump.
You a correct.
Forrest Gump guy? Me neither.
Move on. It was interesting, though, because I was thinking, well, Kurt was in Used Cars with Robert Zemeckis, so they were probably buddies, and he probably did him a solid by doing that. And
he's a really good Elvis.
Yeah.
You know who else he would be great as? Is an elder Wolverine. With the hair. He could do that part. I kept thinking he looks like Wolverine. He could do anything. He could play Snake Plissken. Yeah. Plissken. Fuck.
Call me Snake. Which legendary lawman has been portrayed in two separate films by both Kurt Russell and Kevin Costner?
Oh, one of the Hatfield or McCoys? No, it's
more
Wyatt
obvious.
Earp. It's Wyatt Earp.
It's Wyatt Earp.
Yeah, of course. That was very
It's another just crazy connection between these two guys. That both of those movies, Tombstone and Wyatt Earp, were released within like a year of each other. Yeah. And again, about the myth of the American West and all of these themes of lawmen and outlaws, and romanticizing those feuds and everything. So I just think it's pretty cool that this film stands on those shoulders.
it kind of feels like, I've been enjoying Russell's late QT kind of relationship. Kevin Costner should do a Quentin Tarantino movie. That'd be really cool. I don't know what it would be, but like that'd be interesting. Anyways,
and Costner also, again, he kind of knows his brand and he understands how he comes across, which we've talked about with a lot of the great movie stars, but he does have a lot of range. Like I really enjoyed that movie he did, Mr. Brooks, where he played a serial killer.
Oh yeah.
And like William Hurt is like his conscience.
Oh, William Hurt.
I mean, William Hurt and Costner in a car, like getting deep about shit. I mean, Demi Moore's the like cop who's after them. It's really fun. In his kind of like, I'm gonna be a little trashy for a bit, like era. Costner.
I always think that
great.
Yields really interesting results for whether the movies are great.
When an American icon slums,
right,
but can't help but be great at the same time, that's cool. It's fun to watch.
Well, and there's certain actors that are just always pretty good.
Yeah. That's it for today. I hope you enjoyed our missive on this film. Rate, review, subscribe. We did have a gentleman wrote us a lovely review, didn't he?
Yes.
We begged people for
we just want reviews. We want to feel nice, so we're going to read it. He also, same gentleman, sent us a long email.
He did,
Aslow,
which was very thoughtful and insightful.
About his relationship to the pod that he's now caught every episode of. And let's read the review. So
we got
another review.
Oh, really?
Okay, let's read the reviews. So, first review, 5 stars, instant fan, Scott Saslow. As I write this, I just finished catching up with the entire podcast in the span of a month. If you're even remotely interested in the 80s and 90s action cinema, listen to these guys. They know their stuff and their enthusiasm is contagious. Highly recommended. Thank you, Scott.
Thank you, Scott.
And we got another review from a gentleman who also emailed us.
Oh.
Alex. Die Hard Tenant Draed. So he Die Hard 10 and then Die Hard backwards. So I love this review already.
Okay.
5 stars.
Took me a second.
I can't tell
inverted.
you. That's because you ain't on this temporal pincer movement life, brother. I can't tell you how much I've enjoyed this amazing, stupendous, hilarious, engaging, educational, stunning, unique, collective, joyous, and never-ending against. Maybe that's a mistake. Who knows? Alex, thank you for this 5-star review. We appreciate it.
Alex.
I just saw that review for the first time. Alex also emailed us, and I'm not going to share his email address because that would be rude, but it contained a reference to, speaking of Vegas, Baby Vegas, the film Swingers in his email address.
A film I love.
Yeah. Hey, Phil, I just want you to know as we wrap up today, you're so money and you don't even fucking know.
Dude, I used to live next door to that golf course that was on.
Really?
It's in Swingers. Yeah,
what are you carrying a gun for? In case someone fronts you,
it's my
Snoop
old
Dogg?
stomping ground.
Great movie. Thank you, Tyson Hubley, for doing our
Tyson.
art. You're the
Thank
king.
you for everyone writing these reviews. What else? We plugged it a little bit, but let's plug it again. Our Patreon is 48 at patreon.com/48 hours of buddy movies.
I didn't know we had that.
Yeah. Have you not heard of it? Let me explain. We discuss the history of the buddy movie genre through the lens of Walter Hill's 48 Hours. And we've done now, I think we're at about 14 movies.
Something like that.
Give or take. We've done the Beverly Hills Cop movies. We've done Lethal Weapon. We've done Red Heat. We've done Big Trouble in Little China, RoboCop. The next movie that we're doing on that show is, and we just touched on it, They Live. John Carpenter's 1988 masterpiece. Incredible movie. I just rewatched it and man, it blew me away.
I haven't seen it.
Love that
since
movie.
maybe being 17 years old.
So great. I can't wait to talk about it with you. So that is exclusive content for our Patreon subscribers at the aforementioned www.patreon.com/48 hours of buddy movies. And yes, please tell them how they can save some pennies.
I'm a rude person. To save yourself some pennies, go to patreon.com/48 hours of buddy movies in your desktop browser or on your phone browser. Do not do it through the Apple Podcast app because they do a little upcharge. It's a little tariff, and it costs you a little bit more. So you should always just do it through the website because it actually knocks the price down considerably. We don't get any of that extra chump change. The fine people at Apple take it.
We don't want to end up like Christian Slater in this movie, arguing over money.
The golden rule.
The golden rule.
Whoever
Fuck
gives the most
gold.
money to the Patreon doesn't get shot.
And then next time on this show, do you know what it is?
Well, because I have your script. I do. I didn't
Okay,
cheat,
yes,
but
you
I
did.
just wanted to look at the end thing here.
Oh, how convenient! You knew the you knew the quizzes because I asked you the quiz answers.
Swordfish.
Swordfish.
Dominic Senna back in that. Senna squad, rise up. I don't know what there is of that.
I love it.
Wait, is it Dominic Senna? It is, right?
Yes,
Okay.
it is. So
I'd be
we'll
rude
be
if I
back next time with John Travolta's weird facial hair.
You took my son of a bitch, stole my line.
Hi guys, it's Phil
And Liam.
from Die Hard on a Black, and we're excited to talk to you about a brand new podcast we're launching called 48 Hours of Buddy Movies.
That's right, folks. 48-hour-long
Approximately.
episodes exploring 48 different buddy movies, beginning with the original classic that started it all, Walter Hill's 1982 masterpiece, 48 Hours, starring Nick Nolte and Eddie Murphy.
And just like Die Hard on a Blank, our new show will explore the influence of 48 Hours on the action genre, one buddy movie at a time.
We'll be covering iconic franchises such as the Beverly Hills Cop movies, the Stakeout movies, the Bad Boys movies, classics of the genre like Running Scared,
Hyams Hive Rise Up!
Midnight Run, Red Heat, Tango and Cash, The Hard Way.
Plus tough thrillers such as To Live and Die in LA, Black Rain, Point Break, Training Day, and The Way of the Gun.
As well as a few wild cards that you might not expect, such as RoboCop, Alien Nation, and, of course, Phil's favorite,
Harley Davidson and the Marlboro Man!
So if you're a fan of two buddies talking buddy movies,
Then 48 Hours of Buddy Movies is for you!
visit patreon.com/48 hours of buddy movies to subscribe for the price of 1 cup of coffee a month.
See you in the squad car.
Or walking to the squad car, mildly irritated that we've been paired off.
Wherever. That's patreon.com/48 hours of buddy movies to subscribe.